George W. Bush gives a rare post-presidential interview. Even more controversy over the Georgia voting law. And a verdict is reached in the Derek Chauvin trial. That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. The U.S. State Department advised against travel to 80% of countries due to a resurgence of the coronavirus in many parts of the world. COVID-19 is like the villain in a horror movie. Just when you think it's defeated, it comes back again. And also, it ruined your prom. The State Department said this move would result in a significant increase in the number of countries at level 4 do not travel to approximately 80% of countries worldwide. It also increases the risk level to several other areas of the world, including Antarctica, which is now a level 2 risk for coronavirus. Because as we all know, penguins refuse to socially distance. Look at that. Not a mask to be seen. Great job killing your grandmas because you just had to party on spring break, you selfish penguins. The State Department also advises against traveling to Canada because of a rise in coronavirus cases. But as always, the biggest risk of traveling to Canada is still hockey skates strapped to a moose. I've said it before and I'll say it again, never trust Canada. Speaking of people you should think twice about trusting, George W. Bush gave a rare post-presidential interview this week. In it, he criticized the current GOP's stances on immigration policies and isolationism.
It's a beautiful country we have, and yet it's not beautiful when we condemn, call people names, and scare people about immigration.
Yeah.
I would describe it as isolationist, protectionist, and to a certain extent, nativist.
Yeah. If I learned anything from President Bush, it's that we need to see the world is a big place, full of beautiful countries that we can invade for oil. Speaking of nations we invaded, Bush also criticized President Biden's plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th.
And my first reaction was, wow, these girls are going to have real trouble with the Taliban. And a lot of gains have been made, and so I'm deeply concerned about the plight of women and girls in that country.
Bush added the best way to support women and girls in Afghanistan is through diplomacy, diligence, and of course, invading Iraq. He didn't actually say that, but he was thinking it. That's his solution to everything. A clog in the sink? Well, have you tried invading Iraq? Computer not working. Have you tried turning it off and then invading Iraq again? Wait, did I say Iraq when we were originally talking about Afghanistan? Yep, that's what happened. We may not be so reliant on oil much longer, though, because this week, at a digital climate summit, Joe Biden announced the U.S. has pledged to cut carbon emissions by 50% below 2005 levels by the end of this decisive decade. Biden says he'll work hard to see this goal is met, which is optimistic of him, to assume he'll still be alive in 2030. While we're being blindly optimistic, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin also vowed to cooperate on cutting emissions. Sure, these seem like guys we can trust, but if world leaders are really serious about climate change, they should talk to Kim Jong-un. His country doesn't produce any greenhouse gases. More after the break. Welcome back. In an update to the story we covered on Georgia's controversial voting law, black religious leaders in Georgia, representing more than 1,000 churches, called for a boycott of Home Depot for not taking a stand against the voting law. Bishop Reginald Jackson, who oversees Georgia's African Methodist Episcopal churches, said, "If you, as corporate leaders, do not believe and lack the courage to speak out against this legislation, we will not spend our money to purchase your products." I have to imagine protesting Home Depot will be difficult, since the best place to buy materials to make protest signs is Home Depot. The New York Times actually ran a story listing companies that criticized the bill as well as listing companies that didn't. And you know the New York Times is serious about supporting Georgia, since the font of this headline is Georgia. This New York Times story makes businesses that haven't spoken out against the law targets for protest. It's worth noting that most of the companies that have spoken out against the law have not actually done anything besides just issuing a statement. So seemingly, the New York Times is criticizing businesses that are doing nothing, while praising businesses that are doing nothing but the right way. One thing that is being done the right way is the U.S.'s COVID-19 vaccine rollout. The vaccine is now available to everyone, even prisoners in Guantanamo. A senior defense official said, "Obviously, we don't want an outbreak of COVID on a remote island with the challenges that would present." The coronavirus vaccine still isn't available in many parts of the world. So now, when terrorists in other countries get caught plotting attacks, it might not be because they hate America. It might be because that's their best healthcare option. They didn't actually want to blow anything up, they just knew it was a fast track to vaccination. While we're on the topic of health, if you planned on doing some cardio today, don't! Because the Consumer Product Safety Commission gave an urgent warning to owners of the Peloton Tread Plus to stop using the machine immediately. This is a warning I took so seriously, I stopped using my treadmill 6 years ago. The warning came after reports of children getting trapped, pinned, and even pulled under the Tread Plus. Peloton refused to recall the machine, though. They're calling the warning inaccurate and misleading, and that there's no reason to stop using the machine if safety instructions are followed. Peloton's stock plummeted 7% on Monday, and that's after being down 30% for the year. Wait, the stock tumbled and may never recover? Sounds like it was using the Tread Plus. My main takeaway from the story is, you can't get injured exercising if you never exercise at all. That's probably the most creative healthcare idea since getting sent to Guantanamo for vaccines. More after the break. Welcome back. Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe is suing Twitter after being permanently banned over allegedly operating fake accounts. Project Veritas is a conservative group known for undercover reporting that sometimes uses questionable methods. They've attempted to expose hypocrisy in progressive organizations like Acorn, Planned Parenthood, and CNN. Founder James O'Keefe's lawsuit states the false accusation that Mr. O'Keefe operated fake accounts is particularly damaging for Mr. O'Keefe because Mr. O'Keefe is a journalist. As such, his reputation for transparency and accurate reporting is fundamental to his profession. So, to combat an organization that sometimes uses questionable tactics to undermine people they disagree with, Twitter may be using questionable tactics to undermine people they disagree with. If Twitter is going to remove something from its platform, could it at least be the use of clappy hand emojis after every word? It's annoying! And in the biggest story this week, former police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all counts for the killing of George Floyd. The charges include second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. This guilty verdict caused celebration among onlookers outside the courtroom and likely prevented several riots, except in Portland, where protesters started early by smashing windows at a Popeyes and the Boys and Girls Club before the verdict was announced. Yep, nothing says rebuilding communities like destroying a Boys and Girls Club. Listen, the only reason to destroy a community center is so you don't have to sit through another community theater production of The Full Monty. Nobody wants to see that, Uncle Chester. Chauvin and his attorneys are likely to appeal the decision, in part due to comments made by Congresswoman Maxine Waters before the verdict. Waters, a representative from California, flew into Minneapolis to show support for protesters and also nearly caused a mistrial by saying this.
I hope that we're going to get a verdict that is say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
It seemed like Maxine Waters actually hoped there would be riots. Who does she think she is? CNN? Chauvin's attorneys asked for a mistrial, saying Waters' comments could have potentially influenced the juror's decision. Judge Peter Cahill denied the mistrial, but had this to say.
I wish elected officials would stop talking about this case. Their failure to do so, I think, is abhorrent, but I don't think it has prejudiced us with additional material that would prejudice this jury. They have been told not to watch the news. I trust they are following those instructions.
Waters' remarks received backlash, with many saying it sounded like she tried inciting violence. Nancy Pelosi disagreed with this, explaining Maxine talked about confrontation in the manner of the civil rights movement. So let me get this straight. Telling protesters to stay on the street and be confrontational, not inciting violence. Telling protesters they have to go home now, we have to have peace, impeachment levels of incitement. In response to the verdict, Nancy Pelosi had this to say.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice.
Yikes! Nancy Pelosi must suck at karaoke because she's super tone deaf. The day after the Chauvin verdict was announced, Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the Justice Department would be opening a sweeping investigation into policing practices in Minneapolis. Garland said yesterday's verdict in the state criminal trial does not address potentially systemic policing issues in Minneapolis. I think this is a great idea. While we're at it, can we also address potentially systemic problems in the media's reporting on police issues? Because the same day the Chauvin trial verdict was announced, police in Columbus, Ohio fatally shot Ma'Khia Bryant, a 16-year-old black girl. Columbus Public Safety Director Ned Pettus Jr. called the situation a devastating loss of life, but appealed for calm as the case was investigated and facts were uncovered. He said, fast, quick answers cannot come at the cost of accurate answers. But this request for accuracy didn't stop LeBron James from posting a now deleted tweet featuring a picture of the officer involved in the shooting with the caption, "You're next." It also didn't stop the New York Times or the Washington Post from reporting on the story and omitting the fact that the 16-year-old girl was armed with a knife and attacking two other girls at the time of the shooting. It seems like the New York Times and Washington Post actually hoped there would be riots. Who do they think they are? Maxine Waters? Look, this is America, not communist China. We believe in due process, with a trial by one's peers who've had a chance to review all the evidence. We can't just let people be punished by angry mobs egged on by politicians and the media, or even worse, Twitter. People have a right in this country to a fair trial, like on Judge Judy. Of course, we also have a proud tradition in America of standing up against injustice and making our voices heard. So there are absolutely things that Americans can do, like hold our government officials accountable, create petitions to enact new legislation, and also, have we tried invading Iraq? So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And remember, America Uncovered is supported mainly by viewers. Be sure to visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. Contribute $1 or more per episode. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.